All right, friends. Well, welcome. I'm happy to have Lynette Johnson back. Lynette has been a friend of the diocese. This is what your second program with us, right?
Mhm.
Um, and for anybody who's spent any time with me, you know I'm a huge fan of the Society of St. Andrews and all the really excellent stuff they do in terms of gleaning. Um, but part of why we asked Lynette to do this tonight is because there's so many good resources on their website, and I'm sure she's going to share that website, the link to it. But um, as far as creation care, we wanted to talk about this whole issue of food waste, right? Because we realize that everything's connected, right? And certainly our society is not stellar with respect to food waste. But Lynette, I'm going to let you jump in. I will. If you want me to attempt to do the bio, I could. My short bio is Lynette's the executive director of the Society of St. Andrews, but has been just really a great resource and a good friend to the Diocese of Southern Virginia. So Lynette, I'm happy to welcome you back. And I will turn things over to you, my friend,
All right,
and I'll keep an
thanks.
eye on the chat for you.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask if you would do that. If anybody raises their hand or says something, just interrupt and we'll answer that or talk about that at the time.
Great. And we'll just reminder, ask everybody to please mute if you could. And that helps us minimize the background noise.
All right, let's go. So our topic tonight is hunger in the midst of plenty. About 40% of the food that's grown for human consumption in this country is never eaten. That is a shocking number for some people the first time they hear it. But there are all sorts of reasons for that. Um, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So, where does this food fall out of the food stream? So, there are six basic places where that happens. The first would be in farm fields or orchards. The second would be in packing houses. The third in transportation. In grocery stores is the fourth, and in related places to grocery stores. Restaurants would be the fifth, and the sixth would be at your house and mine. So we're going to take a look at each of those. Generally speaking, farmers when farmers grow their food, let's try it this way. Depending on the type of crop, they may have sale contracts before they plant anything. And so they're planting specifically for the specifications of their sale contracts. In other cases, it may be a crop that has a long shelf life, like sweet potatoes, and they may have some regular customers, but they may also simply be getting contracts after they've already done the harvest. So they'll harvest and put things in their barns to keep them over several months for the eating season for that crop, and they'll sell it gradually out of the barn. But the first reason that food would go to waste in farm fields would be weather related. So that could be a hailstorm that completely destroys a crop. It could be a late frost or an early frost or flooding or snow in a place that's never supposed to get in. That can cause crops not to be good at all. And generally speaking, most growers who have specific sale contracts will grow 15 to 17% more than their sale contract just to be on the safe side when thinking about weather and possibly insect damage. So labor can be an issue for food going to waste. So most farmers don't have labor year-round because they don't need it. And so they will work with migrant laborers who will come in during the harvest season. They'll contract with them for a specific period of time, and that's when they have laborers. So if a field comes in early, before the laborers arrive, or comes in late after the laborers have gone, there's no one left to harvest that food. And so it's likely to just stay in the fields and rot. Another that's really related to harvest timing as well as labor. But another thing related to labor is if they can't get a contract for labor. About a dozen years ago in Alabama, HB 56 was passed, and it essentially outlawed all immigrant labor in the state. And for a season, because of that bill, there was no one there were no groups coming in to harvest anything. And there were terrible newspaper stories about entire crops. I remember one specifically about tomatoes dying on the vine because there was just no one available to harvest them at all. Another reason that food goes to waste in farm fields would be the farmer's level of experience or experimentation. We worked with a grower who for decades had a dairy farm, but sold the dairy farm to seal test. And after that, still had the land and wanted to do something different with it. And so they were thinking about agritourism as a new thing to do on their land. So this farmer read about agritourism and thought he'd start out with the fall season. So he planted pumpkins. Unfortunately, he planted the pumpkins way too late, and they didn't come in time for the harvest. So he actually had to purchase pumpkins from other farmers and throw them in the field so it looked like he had pumpkins for harvest. And he did sell all of those. But when his pumpkins finally were ready for harvest, it was 3 weeks after Halloween. He had planted 5 acres of pumpkins. We were able to send volunteers out and harvest about 250,000 pounds of pumpkins from his fields that would otherwise simply have gone to waste because at that point there was no one interested in having them. We've just recently been dealing with a farmer in Mississippi who decided to grow Japanese purple potatoes. And unfortunately, there's not much of a market in Mississippi for Japanese purple potatoes. So his experimentation left him with 800,000 pounds of unsold potatoes. And unfortunately, there's not really a good way to get those potatoes from him for a variety of logistical reasons, which we may get into as we go further down my list here. Equipment can be a reason that food goes to waste in farm fields. If the harvesting equipment for harvesting mechanically isn't working, then days or even weeks of the harvest season can be lost. Aesthetics is a very big reason that food goes to waste at the farm. If a farmer is harvesting cucumbers for pickles, that's going to be a matter of size, whether those cucumbers meet the sale contract or not. So not necessarily beauty, but size and bend. So his equipment for harvesting cucumbers has built into the harvester a size and bend regulator. And so any cucumbers that don't meet that size registration, either they're too big, they won't go into it, or they're too small, they slide through the gradation and into the next level. They're actually then shot back out into the field and just left to rot in the field. But every fruit and vegetable that's sold in the United States, commercially sold, the USDA, since about the 1940s, has had a set of guidelines for what that produce should look like. So a grade A peach, for instance, can be between 2 7/8 and 3 inches in size. Has to be a certain color tolerance, certain number of blemish tolerances. The crevice can only be so deep. And unless it meets those particular standards, it doesn't meet the qualification for grocery store sale. For bell peppers, green peppers have to be green and red peppers have to be red. And so peppers that are partially green and partially red won't make the cut. Zucchini that has a bend or crookneck squash that doesn't have a bend are not going to make the cut because they don't meet the requirements for the grade A variety. Quality can be an issue. If there's insect damage, if there are burns from the sun, any number of things can affect the quality of the produce. Particularly tomatoes need to be green when they're picked. If they're going to be for cutting tomatoes, they have to be green when they're picked so that they have enough shelf life to get to you after they've been in the refrigerator or refrigerated trucks and whatnot and refrigerated at the grocery store. They've still got to be firm enough to be transported all that way. So if they're too far right already in the field, they're not going to be picked because they don't have the shelf life to make it to the store. Price is often an issue, a reason that it is left in farm fields. If the market price is too low, then it's not worth the farmer's time, effort, and labor to get that food out of the field. One of the researchers that we work with suggests that price is the most significant reason. I'm not sure she's right about that because I know too much about other reasons food goes to waste, but I know it is a significant factor. Demand is a factor, like those purple potatoes. There just wasn't demand for them in Mississippi. That's why they didn't sell. And sometimes it's a seasonal demand. So for sweet potatoes, for instance, the demand ends at Easter or maybe possibly at Mother's Day. But after that, there's no more demand for sweet potatoes until close to Thanksgiving. So any sweet potatoes that are left in barns at the end of after Mother's Day are not going to be able to be sold. Sale contracts are an important reason that food goes to waste in the field. If a farmer doesn't have a sale contract, if a contract falls through, if it doesn't meet the contract standards, those are all reasons that the food will be left behind. Storage can be an issue. A lot of times when farmers are selling out of their barns, they're having to store that for a period of time, and they may not have enough storage space. There may be an issue with the refrigeration or the ambient moisture in their storage facility, and that's going to cause food to go to waste as well. And finally, transportation is an issue, and we'll see this in almost every area of food waste. The food goes to waste because the transportation doesn't work out. Right now, there's a tremendous trucking shortage in this country. At least 250,000 truck drivers are needed to fulfill all of the requests that are happening in this country. And that's a combination of factors. One is that older truck drivers have not wanted to continue. They've gotten to retirement age, or the new electronic logs that truck drivers now have to follow. They're not savvy with computers and were intimidated when that regulation came on and not willing to continue. Or likewise, the latest regulations limit the amount of time they can drive. And so they may have decided it's not financially worth their while to keep driving. And beyond that, the newer, younger truckers getting into the field are not interested in long-haul truck driving. They want to be home every night. So that's caused a tremendous shortage in truckers available to drive produce wherever it needs to go. And it's taken the price of transportation up significantly as well. So there may not be trucks of the type that are needed when the food's needed to be transported. And then even if there are trucks available, they may not be able to get it to market in a timely way. At packing houses, many of the same things we've already talked about. The availability of labor, the grading standards, that's a big reason that food goes to waste. We already talked about that. The handling, if food is dropped, if it falls off the packing line, gets bruised somehow in the process, that's going to render it unable to be sold. Packing house equipment is notoriously picky, and if it gets out of spec, then it can be grading in or out the wrong things. There was a lot of concern during COVID about food going to waste in fields, and people were were really upset that farmers weren't harvesting that food. And a lot of the reason for that was related to their equipment. So farmers typically have a market that they grow for. That can be, for instance, an industrial market. So universities or hospital systems, school systems, prison systems that they're growing for. And when they're growing for those big systems, then their equipment in their packing house is designed to handle food in one way and not in any other ways. So, for instance, if they are set up to provide cored lettuce, as in lettuce that has already been washed, the core has been taken out, and they're whole lettuce heads, and they're contracted to provide them in 1,500-pound bins, then they don't have a way to prepare lettuce any other way. They don't have bins the right size for other lettuce. They don't have packaging for other kinds of lettuce. They've got big bags that can hold 1,500 pounds. They're not going to be able, on a whim or a health emergency like COVID, to suddenly change their packing house lines to create individually wrapped heads of lettuce for the grocery store. And just as when you would lose your job, you wouldn't sell your house first thing or your car because you believe another job is right around the corner. When an emergency like COVID hit, those farmers were not in a position to retool their packing lines for a new use. They couldn't afford to do it, and they also didn't believe, as none of us believed, that COVID was going to last as long as it did, that they wouldn't, be able to go back and do their usual things within a few weeks. Timing matters, the day or the season or the year. As I mentioned, sweet potatoes. People eat grandma's sweet potato casserole at Thanksgiving, the one with the marshmallows on the top, and they eat it at Christmas, and they eat it at Easter. But after that, they're pretty much done. And so any sweet potatoes that are left after that point are not going to be sold. Storage conditions. A lot of potatoes and apples as well are stored overwintered. So apples and potatoes both come out of the ground in the fall, and they're sold throughout the winter from packing houses. And sometimes things ripen faster in the packing house than the grower would expect. And so they need to be given away or they're thrown away. Because if you start getting a couple of rotten apples in a large bin, well, that whole bin is going to go bad very quickly. So the farmers have to keep a close eye on that to be sure that the apples or whatever is going to stay fresh as long as they want it to. And it absolutely is not in the farmer's interest to send food on that they don't believe is wholly marketable. If any part of it, we'll talk about that in a minute with the transportation and the grocery stores, but if any part of a load that they send is not wholly marketable, then that truckload is going to get rejected, and the farmer will not only have to pay to send it to the store, they'll have to pay to get it back from the store or pay to have it dumped somewhere. And that's a really expensive proposition. And finally, food safety and food quality is a reason that people should list. So anytime that there is any question at all of food safety or general quality, it's going to be graded out of the packing house instead of going on. There was a grocery store trade association that did a study back about 10 years ago that determined that 1 out of every 7 tractor trailer loads of food bound for the grocery store never make it. That's a tremendous amount of food waste before the food even reaches store shelves. About 14% of food bound for grocery stores doesn't ever get there. And the reasons for that are temperature. A single degree of temperature error in the vehicle, in the truck, causes a loss of 3 days of shelf life. So if a contract is to get the truckload of beans to the store with 2 weeks of shelf life, and it goes in with 11, it reaches the grocery store distribution center with 11 days of shelf life, that whole truckload is going to be rejected, all because the temperature was off a single degree. The timing can be an issue. If the truck was supposed to arrive at the grocery store distribution center between 4 and 5 p.m. and it arrives at 6:30, it will be rejected because there are plenty of other trucks that are scheduled to arrive at 6:30. And they don't have a way to unload it because it doesn't have the dock time for them. If the truck is too heavy, they're going to have to offload when they go through a weigh station. Handling can be an issue. Pallets can slip in the truck. Boxes on pallets can slide off, and a truck will be rejected for that reason. Road conditions, the weather's too bad, the truck has to stop. Driver regulations. Drivers have a limited number of hours they can drive a day. And when their hours are reached, they have to stop the truck. I'm not sure whether it's gone into place or not yet, but the latest trucks are supposed to be set just to cut off at that time and not allow the driver to go any further. So they need to be off the road before the truck stops in order to meet those driver regulations. The availability of trucks, the availability of drivers, we've already talked about. A breakdown by the side of the road can delay them arriving. It can cause a change in the temperature and obviously cause the truck not to arrive in a timely way. An accident can cause the same thing. We've all seen stories of oranges spilling across the road because the truck got into an accident. Misdirection gets shipped to the wrong place. And then permitting can be an issue. For instance, citrus has to have certain coatings that will leave the state in which it's grown. So if the driver doesn't show up with the right permits to show that the food has had those coatings added, then that food is going to be rejected. In grocery stores or grocery store distribution centers, and this is the reason that those regulations that the USDA put into effect about the quality standards, the size and the shape and the color of every fruit or vegetable came into play, actually, with grocery store distribution centers. In grocery store, when highways started to be built in the 40s and grocery store chains came into existence, they were suddenly purchasing from lots of different sources. Whereas until that time, mostly food was sold locally, close to where it was grown and seasonally. With the advent of the highway system and airplane transportation as well, suddenly the ability to purchase food from multiple sources in multiple states became a possibility. And so grocery store chains needed to know that the peaches that they were paying 20 cents a pound for from the supplier in South Carolina, but those peaches were the same quality as peaches for the same price from the supplier in Texas or California or somewhere else. So federal and state inspections generally are related to the USDA standards. So if they'll open one box within a particular truck, and if in that single box, 10% of what's in the box does not meet the standard for that item, the entire truckload of 42,000 pounds of food will be rejected. So they'll just check out 40 pounds worth of food, and if 4 pounds is off, they'll reject 42,000 pounds of food. We work with bananas in a lot of places. Those bananas are coming from ports, usually Philadelphia, Galveston are the ports that bananas would come in from. They're coming from Central America, and they're harvested in the big bunches that you see on TV that go up several levels with hundreds of bananas on each level. And they're put into shipping crates and shipped by boat from Central America to the port. And then they're auctioned off on the port to the grocery store chains. But when they're auctioned off, they're boxed. And when they're boxed, then the dock workers are putting them into the size bunches that you yourself would buy at the grocery store and lining them up in banana boxes, obviously. But what can happen is that there can be a mismatch of box bottoms and box tops. This seems like a really silly thing, but the barcode is on the box top. And so if a dock worker haphazardly should put two box bottoms together, there is no barcode on that box. And that means that the entire truckload in which that box is placed is going to be rejected because the manifest says that there are a certain number of boxes on the truck. But the box that doesn't have a barcode doesn't count. So that truckload of perfectly good, perfectly fresh bananas, they meet the grocery store requirements in terms of the way they look, the size, the shape, the color. They've got plenty of shelf life. The temperature's just right. Everything is perfect, except there are two box bottoms on one 40-pound box of bananas. And again, that whole truckload is going to be rejected for that reason. Store chain and distribution center inspections may go a step further than federal and state inspections because there may be a specific requirement that that store has requested. So they may want, I can't think of anything right off, but they may want things packaged in a certain way. So they may have asked for the kiwis to be in clamshell containers. And if they don't arrive in clamshell containers of the right size, then that truckload is going to be rejected. Even though the kiwis are fine and people might buy them with 5 kiwis in the box instead of 3, they'll still reject it. So manifest, we just talked about. If the manifest doesn't match what's in the truck, then it won't pass the inspection, and that truckload will be rejected. Packaging is a strange issue. I mentioned the kiwis, but another reason for packaging changes would be if, say, Dole, for its packaged salads, decided to change and put a little bit more carrots and take out a little bit of kale from a particular package. Well, any salads that were packaged in the old packaging but have the new ingredients in them will be rejected. They won't be able to be sold. Or if Del Monte changes the color of green in their logo to a different Pantone number, then anything that's packaged in the old colored packages with a slightly different variation of green won't be able to be sold. Contract compliance. If the contract calls for 3 to 5 inch green beans and these green beans are 5.5 inches, they're not going to make it. Storage, too old, too young, wrong temperature. Timing would be, again, it arrives too early, too late. Equipment, perhaps wherever this was going, the equipment for unloading or the packaging, if it's going to a place where it will be packaged into something else, is broken, then that will cause the loads to be rejected. In North Carolina, about a dozen years ago, we had a farmer who, after Easter, which Easter was late that year, he had about 6.7 million pounds of sweet potatoes left in his barns because the sale contract he had with Walmart had fallen through. He called us in a panic because the typical thing, if you've got a few loads of sweet potatoes left at that point, would be that you would send them to the cannery. And at the time, at least, there was one sweet potato cannery in the country, in Louisiana. And so all of the leftover sweet potatoes in the country would head to Louisiana to the cannery around the 1st of May. But this particular year, so this farmer had way too many sweet potatoes in his barn because the sale contract fell through, and the equipment in the cannery was broken. Well, because that was the only sweet potato cannery in the country, they had to order the equipment from Germany to replace it, and it was weeks and weeks before the equipment was fixed. So we were able to help him place a couple of million pounds of his sweet potatoes. And then eventually he got a sale contract for most of the rest. And finally the cannery reopened, so he was able to get the rest into the cannery. But that was an issue for a lot of sweet potato growers that year. We're going to get to the percentage of food that there's a question, and we're going to get to the percentage of food that is recovered toward the end of my presentation. Transportation, we talked about displays. I don't know if you've ever noticed in the store, a lot of times for fruit and vegetable displays, there might be little mache type cups that hold the apples or pears in them, and they hold them also perfectly. So apples have to be the right size, pears have to be the right size for those little cups in order to be in the display. So if there's anything that's not the right size to fit in the little cups, it's not going to go out on the shelf. Shelf life is an issue in grocery stores. There can be a problem with the refrigeration there, either in the back or on the floor, that causes the temperature to be off and the shelf life not to be what's expected. I did mention tomatoes needing to be green when they left the field. The reason those tomatoes are red when they get to the grocery store is that they are gassed with ethylene along the way, and the ethylene changes the color to red, which makes them look ripe on the outside. But when you bring them home, you may find that they are still unripe tomatoes, only red in color. And that causes a lot of people to decide that their tomatoes aren't any good when they get them home. Demand and marketing are an issue. Again, a lot of that has to do with farmer experimentation. Somebody may get a contract to sell white cranberries, but white cranberries just don't have the appeal of red cranberries. So those won't sell. Or a marketing association could decide that they want to promote a certain kind of produce. So a few years ago, round personal watermelons were in. They're very small and they're mostly rind, but they were seedless and they were small and they were cute. And that year there was no demand for regular oblong watermelons. People just didn't want them because they wanted to get the small personal sized ones instead. Aesthetics as well. In American grocery stores, we expect to see all the food on the shelves all the time. So from early in the morning to late at night, everything should be right there so that we have all the choices. And what we have available to look at in the grocery store is the best of the best that there is already. And when we are picky, when we go through the grocery store and we pull off the two prettiest bananas that are just the right degree of ripeness for the way we like them. I, for instance, like tomorrow's bananas, and my father likes yesterday's bananas. But we pick out the ones that we want, particularly with bananas. It leaves an odd-sized bunch that somebody else might not want. Or we pick up the pears to see if they're ripe. But while we're pressing on them, we're bruising them. And those bruised spots are going to cause rot sooner rather than later. So we ourselves contribute to some of the issues with food going to waste at the grocery store. But certainly the idea that everything should be on the shelves all the time is a huge contributor to waste at the grocery store. At restaurants and in food service, variety of reasons that food goes to waste there as well. The quality of the ingredients, it may be purchased in bulk, and it could be that once it gets to the restaurant, the chef says, today these just aren't going to work. A lot of times that may be something to do with proteins like fish, for instance, as well as produce. Food safety can be an issue. If something is out on the food line a certain amount of time, then food safety becomes an issue and that food has to be discarded. Certainly with restaurants, food service for schools, this is a place where this happens a lot. Food that crosses the line into someone's hands is no longer eligible to be eaten by anybody except the person who received it. And in school food service, that often means that milk and juice, which are provided with school breakfast, for instance, maybe a child will only drink one orange juice or drink the orange juice, but not the milk, or vice versa. But once that food has crossed the cafeteria line, then the cafeteria can't take it back for food safety reasons. It's no longer properly cooled. So a lot of times that food will go to waste. We were able to work with a school in North Carolina to put refrigerators into the cafeteria. And they agreed, the school system agreed that students who only drank either the milk or the juice, whichever one was left unopened, they could themselves take it to the refrigerator in the cafeteria, on the public side of the cafeteria, and put it in the refrigerator. And then we were able to recover that food and give it to food pantries for distribution. So it's not that there really is an unsafe issue, it's that the food safety regulations that food service deals with have to be based on safety of the masses. And they really can't rearrange those because it would be more convenient in the school for that food still to be served. Portion size is a big issue for restaurants and for food service as well. The portions are much larger than anyone could eat, but that again goes to the same aesthetic as the grocery stores wanting to have all the food all the time. You don't want to go into a restaurant unless you're into modern fusion type things where small portions are the expectation. But most restaurants, you want to see a full meal on the plate. But restaurants do go overboard with that again because they want people to be sure they have enough. Buffets are a very big reason for food going to waste. Again, the food can only be on the line for a certain period of time, and then whatever's left in that buffet tray is going to be thrown away. Family style service, where all the food is brought in bowls to your table. So everything that's available comes to your table in a bowl. If your family doesn't eat whatever that is, or doesn't eat all of it, that food is going to be thrown away when it goes back to the kitchen. Sorry, I didn't mean to lose that slide. Menu demand, they could plan for a particular menu item to sell really well and it doesn't sell. Recipes and preparation, again, could need different varieties of the items or different quantities of items. The preparation something could burn or not be cooked thoroughly. So those are reasons that food would go to waste. Appetites, maybe people don't want the vegetable that comes with the protein on that particular meal. How things are marketed, whether they're staffed to serve and prepare. Customer service is the reason food gets left behind. And finally, perception of leftovers. So many times people go out to eat. I'm going to be traveling next week and I may not have a refrigerator available or a way to heat food back up if I had leftovers. So I may refuse to take leftovers from a meal that I have in a restaurant because of the traveling situation. Other times, maybe somebody's on a date and they would be embarrassed to take the leftovers home or out with the boss or something. And so perception of leftovers, and my children always thought that leftovers were a terrible thing, and that it was embarrassing to ask for a doggy bag in a restaurant. But those are all reasons for food to go to waste. It's almost a wonder we have any food to eat, right? Oh, sorry, I did it again. In homes, we get busy and we don't eat the things that we bought to eat. We change plans. Sorry, that's not doing what I want it to do. There we go. We end up out at the soccer game instead of home fixing the meal that we intended to fix. Certain family members won't eat certain things that we prepare. I buy 5 bananas at the store, and by the time I get 4 of them eaten, the 5th one is too ripe to eat. And I've already got a dozen bananas in my freezer to make into banana bread sometime and no room to put another one. Meal planning, a lot of us go to the grocery store without meals in mind. We just buy what seems attractive at the store when we're there. And a lot of times we may go to the grocery store when we're hungry. So we buy even more than we need. Recipe mismatches. You can only buy whipping cream in a certain size container, but you may only need half of that for your recipe. And then you don't have another recipe that's going to use whipping cream by the time that whipping cream is done. Leftovers all look the same after a while. And they don't look very attractive, and we forget about them. So they get left, or, it just doesn't seem like the meal tastes as good the second go around. One of my bad habits is that when I cook something and I've got leftovers and I freeze it, I'm going to know what that is when I look in the freezer. I'm always going to remember what that is, and so I don't label it. And then after a while, everything in my freezer looks the same, and I have no clue what's in that dish. And a sensible thing would be just to take it out and heat it up and see what it is, but I don't always want to do that. Deep refrigerators are a reason that food goes to waste at home. Things get lost at the back of the crisper drawer or the back of the refrigerator. And finally, we don't always prepare things or store them well. And even when we do prepare things well, I had a pear for lunch today, but I cut my pear into fourths and I threw away the stem. And then I cut a little section of each of the center of the fourths to get rid of the kind of stalky area in the center and the seeds. So that was probably about 8 to 10% waste on my pear. Even though I did eat the whole pear, there still was waste. And certainly sometimes when we store things, we don't store them in an airtight way, or maybe we put foil over the apples and the acid in the apples eats through the foil, and then we've got little bits of foil on our apple dish in the refrigerator, and it's not very appealing to eat. So what we know from studies that have been done is that about 25% of the food that goes into your home or into homes generally is not eaten. So it amounts to about $1,500 worth of food per family per year is uneaten. It's like you take 4 grocery bags of food out of the grocery store and just toss one of them in the trash before you go home. So that's a lot of food waste in your home. The consequences of food waste, food going uneaten, loss of natural resources inputs, the water that's used to grow food, the land that food is grown on, the seeds, the soil itself is depleted growing food, the loss of animal habitats and natural lands. One of the biggest partners in food waste reduction right now is the World Wildlife Federation. That one surprised me at first, but their concern is that if we're working to feed a world that has 9 billion or more people, we're going to continually need to be taking more land to grow food for people. And as we use more land to grow food for people, then there's less land available to grow food for animals. Loss of human productivity. The effort that goes into growing food is wasted if that food is not eaten. There's a loss of income for farmers, farm workers, and the industries that work with them when food goes to waste or when food is not harvested. Certainly suboptimal use of developed resources when food does not meet its best use. Higher costs for consumers, higher landfill usage, methane gas emissions, and then obviously loss of food for human consumption. What could we do with the food if it weren't lost? Well, we could feed hungry people. We can improve nutrition in the diets of those who have enough to eat. We could create and sell value-added products. I'm going in June to a conference for ReFed, which is a national think tank related to food waste. And one of the pushes that they made in their early years, they started around 2016, one of the early pushes that they had was for folks to be taking food that would otherwise go to waste and using it to create value-added products. So if you had tomatoes that were too ripe to sell, using those instead to create different kinds of salsas that you could sell for a higher price. There are a number of folks who are using the byproducts from hops and barley used in manufacturing of beer to create breads. So those are examples of value-added products. The problem with those is that they don't use much of the product. And the reason I mentioned REFED is I was at one of their conferences a couple of years ago, and there was someone that they were promoting being a really innovative user of food that would otherwise have gone to waste. They were using the pulp left over from a juicery. So when the juices were made, the pulp was left, and this company took that pulp and they were making gummies out of it for sale. And what they said was that when their product was fully operational, they would use 10,000 pounds of juice pulp a year making their gummies. That's a great use for 10,000 pounds of juice pulp, but 10,000 pounds is not even the beginning of a drop in the bucket. When we're looking at on-farm losses of 28 to 30 million tons of food annually in the United States alone. So 10,000 pounds, but it's great, but it's not much. Food can be used to feed animals, could be used to create biofuels and energy. And maybe there's other uses as well that people are still dreaming up. The USDA used to have a food waste hierarchy, but they just changed it to this swoosh. And what they do now is they say these are the things that you should do with food that could be wasted, and on the left side, and then that goes, the colors become lighter as it becomes less desirable uses of food. So they say the most preferred use is to prevent wasted food in the first place, produce, buy, and serve only what's needed. Second would be to donate or upcycle, which would be ensuring that people eat the food. Next would be feeding animals or leaving it behind in the fields. And we do often get asked, what's the problem with leaving food behind in the fields? It does nourish the soil. The issue is that less than 9% of what's left is needed to nourish the soil fully. And in some cases, a lot less than that because of the amount of food that's left behind. So there's just no reason to leave that much food in fields to think that it's nourishing the soil. Composting or anaerobic digestion would be the next best use. Interestingly enough, if you're talking to people about wasting food, so maybe you've got a dinner at your church and you want to have a conversation about food waste and you want to get people to waste less food, the worst thing you can do is tell them that the whatever is left will be composted. Because people feel like compost is a good thing to do, and they won't feel bad about leaving food on their plates if they know that the food will be composted. Anaerobic digestion is an increasingly popular use of food, either to create the biosolids to apply to the land, or to create energy. A lot of current grocery store food waste is going to anaerobic digestion. And then to avoid sending down the drain, landfilling, or incinerating would be the worst uses. Upcycling food, thank you, that's a good question. Upcycling is what I just suggested, like using the juice pulps to create gummies or the tomatoes to create salsa. It is a good use, but it's just simply not going to use food at volume. You might consider Misfits Market an upcycling because their premise is taking that produce that would otherwise go to waste and then reselling it at a portion of the cost to people who want to purchase that food and are willing to eat it. In reality, at this point, originally that was what Misfits Markets was doing, was getting all produce that was misfit or considered ugly or imperfect produce. But currently, because of the volume of business they do, they can't sustain simply getting food that would not otherwise be harvested. The ability to plan for that is much tougher. So I think right now they're at about 20 to 30% what they sell currently fits that ugly or imperfect category. So they're doing well with that piece of it, but it's kind of a drop in the bucket. So the United Nations created a series of 17 sustainable development goals for the world. And the first 4 of those, actually, the first 3 of them really relate to food waste and what could be done with food. One is ending poverty. So goal number 1 is ending poverty in all its forms everywhere. And having access to food is a good way of working to eliminate poverty. 2 is a zero hunger United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. And that goal is to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. And then goal 3 is ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. So all of those goals really do pertain to the availability of healthy food. And right now, about 844 million people in the world don't always know where their next meal is coming from. So access to food continues to be an issue around the world, as well as here at home, where right now it's about 42%. I'm sorry, not 42%. 42 million people in this country have difficulty accessing enough food to feed their families. So barriers to rescuing the food before it goes to waste is an interesting question as well. So the location, so where the food is, can be a barrier to the distribution. Right now, we are working with a partner named FarmLink that has access to some unbelievable quantity, 50, 60 million pounds of white potatoes that are in the middle of Canada. And they want to bring them into the United States. But the distribution for those, based on because of where they are, is going to be in the upper Midwest. Well, the upper Midwest already has lots and lots of potatoes growing there. So in a way, it's the bringing coals to Newcastle thing. There's not a lot of demand for potatoes where those potatoes are available for distribution right now. And cost-wise, it's really prohibitive to move the potatoes much further. And there are questions about the shelf life of them as well. Accessibility can be an issue for rescuing food. That can be in the distribution end as well as the acquisition end. We've worked with, I'm thinking of a tomato farmer in Alabama who had a number of acres of tomatoes that were too ripe for him to sell. But unfortunately, there was a flood that took away his road access to the fields. So he couldn't, they became too ripe because the flood wouldn't allow him to get his trucks in to do the harvesting when they were of the right ability to harvest or the right ripeness for harvest. And then when they were too ripe, he invited us in to come and harvest them. And we've worked out a system, a fire brigade system, for being able to get at least some of those tomatoes out of the field. But what ended up happening at that time was, unfortunately, also, or maybe fortunately, I'm not sure which, but the federal commodity food program had a glut of tomatoes right then. And every food bank within 5 states of Alabama was already saturated with tomatoes at that point. So we had no means for distributing them if we could get them. And the food banks were distributing to all of the subsidiary agencies, so they didn't want the tomatoes either. Volume and scale can be an issue. Depending on what's available, the level of ripeness. We work best with farmers who have smaller farms because if we're sending gleaners into the fields, we may have a limited number of gleaners and a short period of time in which the farmer will allow us to do the gleaning. So Perhaps the farmer has 5 acres of whatever the crop is, and we're able to get gleaners in 3 times, and we're able to glean maybe half an acre of it. And so the other 9/10 of that food is still going to end up going to waste because we couldn't get the gleaners in a timely way before they needed to plow the field under. Personnel, again, number of gleaners available, uh, people to bag food, prepare food, go into packing houses and check and see what's right. Having a plan for how that food's going to be used can be a barrier. Well, the proximity of the food to where it's going, which affects the cost. Urgency, if it's got a very short shelf life, then it's got to go to an agency that's going to serve it the same day or the next day. Or perhaps it's the condition is just no longer good enough even to give away. Familiarity with the produce type is an issue. If we receive a type of produce that is not typical, let me start this sentence a different way. My grandmother was a big gardener, and she had a huge vegetable vocabulary. She grew just about every kind of vegetable that you can think of, and she harvested them all. She canned and preserved. She ate vegetables all the time, and was really very responsible with how she used the food that she grew. My mother was a from scratch cook who cooked a lot of vegetables, but her vegetable vocabulary was maybe half the size of my grandmother's. I don't remember my mother ever serving rhubarb or rutabaga, for instance, or kale. Those were just not things that we knew. And I was a single mom with 3 kids, and my kids ate what was convenient. They knew lettuce and beans and corn and tomatoes, and I'm not sure they knew anything else. They become more adventurous eaters as adults, but they didn't know many vegetables as kids. And so if we get fruits or vegetables that are not part of the common vegetable vocabulary, we're going to try to match that produce with a specific type of agency. It may be a soup kitchen or a feeding program that's going to prepare and serve it. So those daikon radishes aren't going to go into someone's food bag at a food pantry and then just get thrown away because they have no clue what to do with it. We also may find that there is a particular, that particular type of food is a cultural staple for some community. And so we will try to find refugee or immigrant groups for whom that cultural staple would be a real treat. Similarly, if we're working with a group of unsheltered folks, it's not handy to give them a potato for baking because there's no way that they'll be able to deal with it. They can't bake anything. They also, a lot of the time, folks who have been unsheltered for any length of time have dental issues, and offering them whole apples is not a good match either, because they're not going to be able to eat them. They won't have perhaps a knife handy for cutting them up to be able to chew them. Whereas applesauce, well, prepared at a shelter, might be a much better use for those apples. So we do try to match the food to who can be the best user of the food, who's most likely going to be able to eat it or prepare it. And certainly, if we think about people who are living on the margins, their ability to prepare or store food, refrigerated food, having pots and pans is always a question. Having a lot of recipes that people have. So even well-meaning people who hand out recipes, when they hand out food, those recipes may have 8 or 9 ingredients. And that's just not going to work for somebody who's preparing food in a marginal kitchen, but they may not have the pots and pans. They may not have many of those ingredients that we take for granted because we've got a pantry full of them. And so we're always going to have the cilantro or the paprika or whatever it is on hand. And some other folks who receive food may not. So the simplicity of recipes and the ease of preparing, knowledge of what the food is, are really important. Dietitians tell us that a child, for instance, needs to try a food 7 times before they're going to decide that they like it. And families who are living on the margins don't have the luxury of trying food 7 times. So it's really important that we do what we do right in handing out food, distributing food, that it's getting to people who will be able to use that type of food and for whom it really will be an improvement to their diet and not just something that they cart up 3 flights of stairs today and have to take back down to the garbage next week because they didn't know what to do with it. One of the most useful things that churches can do by way of helping families who are living on the margins is to have a kitchen closet, a closet that has pots, pans, individual containers of spices, crock pots, ways that can help people prepare food. So think about that as one thing that your congregation can do to assist. Cost of food can be an issue. We will get microgreens donated that would sell in the grocery store for $25 a pound. And a lot of folks, that's a luxury they can't afford. Packaging can be an issue that causes food to go to waste too fast. Storage is also an issue. If you wash your strawberries, for instance, before you put them in the refrigerator, they're going to rot very quickly in the refrigerator. Logistics is always a problem, getting the trucks to the right place at the right time. And then distribution. We work in a number of counties in Alabama and Mississippi where there is simply no food distribution infrastructure. Those counties may have one grocery store, and perhaps 50 to 60% of the people in the counties living in poverty. And the social services infrastructure doesn't exist for the distribution of food. A lot of people have huge transportation issues there. So figuring out ways to distribute food where there is no distribution infrastructure is really a challenge. That's one of the things that the Society of St. Andrew excels in. We work really hard to do. A lot of food agencies work with food in only one way, that they expect people to come to their location to pick up the food, or that they only distribute food the one way. But we really try to work with the particular situation to find a way to make the food available. We work with one shelter in a big city that shelters, well, it feeds about 1,200 people a day. It doesn't shelter that many, but it does shelter several hundred. And they feed breakfast and dinner every day. And they send folks out for the day with a sack lunch. And what we found when we first visited there was that they had in their cooler, which was about the size of a fast food restaurant walk-in cooler, maybe the size of a small walk-in closet, they had a bag of, like a 2-pound bag of chopped salad, and a 10-pound bag of potatoes, and a bag of carrots. And that was all the fresh produce that they had for the week for their clients to eat. But that refrigerated space needed to be used for everything, not just produce. So it was a challenge for them to be able to store fresh produce and have it in quantities that they needed. And so what we worked out with them was that there are 3 farmers markets in that town or in that city that operated on different days of the week. And so we arranged to glean at the end of the farmers market day at all 3 of those markets. And we would pick up, depending on the day and the season, between 200 and 700 pounds of produce on a given day. And we would take all of that produce to that shelter, so that 3 times a week they were getting a free infusion of fresh produce at peak of freshness to serve their clients. whereas a single truckload of 2,100 pounds once a week would have completely overwhelmed them. So we really try to work out solutions that are uniquely tailored for the recipients of the food. So who's working on reducing food waste? Federal government, the USDA and FDA are both very involved in this. State departments of agriculture and health are very involved. Some localities in Florida, we work very closely with the city of Orlando with their food waste reduction program, as an example. Lots and lots of nonprofits. I can't even begin to tell you how many. There are over 200 major food banks in this country that are part of the Feeding America system. There are 200 gleaning organizations right now, which the Society of St. Andrew is the largest. And then lots and lots and lots of other agencies that are feeding hungry people and working with restaurants and grocery stores and nonprofits, other nonprofits, and food service programs in their communities to provide or food that would otherwise go to waste, but is still perfectly safe and nutritious to eat to their clients. Congregations and civic groups are involved. Activists are trying to change systems writ large to be able to make a difference and keep people from being hungry and find ways to use food that would otherwise go to waste. Individuals and families who come out to glean, who are drivers to get food by using app systems that exist to get food from restaurants to feeding agencies. Technology absolutely is helping in a lot of cases. We have just in Indiana acquired a program called Food Drop that was started by the Hunger Action Network in Indianapolis. They've just turned the program over to us. And that provides an app-based system for truck drivers when they have a load that's rejected to use to be able to find quickly one of, right now it's 12 agencies in the state, located all around the state, who can receive that food at any hour of the day or night that the load may be rejected. And we're looking to expand that into Illinois initially and then to all of our other states as well. So the possibility of technology helping us reduce food waste is great. But again, it's a thing that has to be taken with a grain of salt and used with caution. Those programs, technology app-based programs, when they first started out, they were matching anybody with anybody. It wasn't necessarily a one-to-one correspondence. So you could say that you would be a driver and you would look on the app when you've got time to be the driver, and you might get called to a farm within the city limits to pick up carrots to take to a shelter or a feeding program of some sort. And you think, oh, great, I'm going to go get a box of carrots. But then you get to the farm and you find out it's 600 pounds of carrots and they want you to take them all. And that's more than you're prepared to lift or that your little Honda is prepared to hold. So some of those app programs are still learning the system and figuring out how to make one-to-one correspondences. It's a great idea and it's a work in progress. So those are interesting challenges and ones that individuals who work on technology are working on and are improving daily. And finally, I hope that you're on the case, that you're working in your own home to reduce food waste and in the communities where you live. So in answer to the first question, how effective is food rescue in addressing hunger? Right now, the best estimate in this country is that 1% of the food that's currently grown but not sold or consumed being rescued for distribution to people in need. I think that is less than that, but 1% is the best estimate that we hear. And in order to meet all of the food needs in the US, we would need to rescue 40. And this is not just the Society of St. Andrew, this is all of the hunger relief organizations in the entire country. Their work combined is rescuing about 1% of the food that's available. The volume of food that would be required to meet all US hunger needs if all of the issues that we just talked about were not issues, would be 14%. So we would need to do 14 times as much as we're doing now to meet every single food need in this country. And enough food is currently grown to feed 526 million people. We've got 342 million. So that's kind of where the bigger picture is. But I would like also to say that we're just beginning to be able to measure the amount of food waste, or food that goes to waste at the farm level, and to have a picture of what's left behind. So there's a research scientist out of North Carolina who, as her PhD research, developed a plan, a protocol to be able to measure accurately the amount of food still left in the field. And what she did was she started out by measuring the entirety of food left in an acre of a field. So what she did was she harvested every single thing that was still in that acre, and she divided it into 3 categories. One was perfectly marketable. The other was edible but not marketable, so it didn't meet typical standards, but was still fresh, food safe, able to be eaten, good for donation. And then the third quality that she divided it into was food that was not edible. So too ripe, insect damage, rotten, anything that would keep it from being really edible. And so she first measured the whole acre, and then she started taking measurements of various sizes within the acre to see what sample size would give her the best approximation to the full acre. And she tested this out over multiple crops in multiple places, multiple states, different times of year. And her system is that you measure 3 150-foot rows in various parts of a single acre. And that can give you, for that field, however large the field is, the same field, same farmer, a good estimate of what's left in their fields. And then that can be approximated over fields growing across an entire state. So, for instance, her research shows right now in North Carolina every year, 460 million pounds of sweet potatoes are left in fields. 460 million pounds. So that's not being rescued at all at this point. And she's done similar. We've worked with her on measurements in Tennessee and now in South Carolina, doing crop measurements to assist with her programming. So and in fact, I'm leading a workshop in Seattle next week with her and with someone from the EPA on her research and how that's working. But it's pretty exciting to begin to understand the scale of the issue. And one of the things that we're trying to do, in the past, we've always just worked with expediency. So whatever we've got volunteers to go in and glean, we'll go do, and we're happy for what we've got. But given this new research and the new interest that nationwide in finding out how much food is left, we are about to institute a new database for our programs that will allow us, it'll give us space to record how large a field we're being offered. So a farmer offers us 5 acres to glean in a time frame of 3 weeks. We'll then be able to record that, we were able to send groups in 6 times to glean during that 3-week time period, and we were able to glean 1.5 acres. So then we can estimate from what we were able to glean and distribute how much food we left behind. And then that can help us to really plan for the future and to be able to share with our funders and others, if we had had more volunteers, if we had had more funds, if we had had more of the resources that we need, in the time frame, we could have recovered and distributed X amount of food instead of the amount that we did recover. So we are always finding ways to acquire new data points and use that data to really drive our decision making moving into the future and help us be more efficient and more effective at what we do more efficiently and effectively feed more hungry people. I think the last thing I want to show you is just an example of the quantity of food waste that people just don't begin to comprehend, and I certainly didn't. When we think about, yeah, we want to use all of this food to feed hungry people, we want to keep it all from going to waste. We need to just begin to consider the volume. So this is in Crossville, Tennessee, on the Cumberland Plateau. And this area is considered the green bean capital of the eastern United States. So the preponderance of green beans grown east of the Mississippi are grown in and around the Cumberland Plateau. This is one farmer on one road, his packing house, in Crossville. There are 4 other green bean packing houses owned by other companies on the same road, each one of them doing about the same volume that this farmer is doing. So this particular farmer grows 3,000 acres of green beans on the Cumberland Plateau. And over the course of a 154-day growing season, he plants these 3,000 acres 3 times. So effectively, he's growing 9,000 acres of green beans. His sale contract is for 3 to 5 inch whole green beans. So from early June until mid-September, every day that it hasn't poured rain the day before and isn't pouring rain that day, he's harvesting green beans. If it's pouring rain that day or the day before, that that field is lost. There's nothing to be harvested. It's going to ruin the green beans. So they can't be super moist coming out of the field. So he harvests fields in the morning and brings them to his packing house so that the green beans come to his packing house by noon every day. And from 1 o'clock until 9 o'clock every day, he's running his machinery. And trucks, they just back up under his packing house. As you see right here, this truck, the beans are harvested mechanically, and this truck is holding about 20,000 pounds of green beans. And so they just keep coming into his packing house throughout that 8-hour period, or from 1 to 9 every day. And as soon as they get into the packing house, they immediately, so this truck will back completely into the packing house. It'll vacuum the green beans out of the bed of the truck, and they immediately go into a sorter, and the sorter assesses the whole 3 to 5 inch green beans versus the ones that aren't whole or aren't 3 to 5 inches. The ones that meet his criteria immediately go into an airplane-sized turbine. Looks like an airplane turbine engine, but it's a washer and then a dryer that get the green beans cleaned and ready for sale. And they come out of that and they hit boxes on his packing line. And within 40 minutes of getting into the packing house, every green bean that meets his sale contract is packaged, is washed, dried, boxed, refrigerated, and ready to go out on another truck to hit the sale, to be transported for wherever they're supposed to go for sale. However, the green beans that don't meet his sale contract will take a trip around on a conveyor belt around the outer edge of the inside of the packing house. They don't get washed or dried, so they're still hot from the field. And they go around the inside edge of the packing house, and they go up and up and up and up until they finally come out on the conveyor belt outside, where they go into a dump truck. He throws away 1,000 pounds of fresh green beans every 6 to 10 minutes, 8 hours a day, 154 days a year, because they don't meet his sale contract requirements. He actually throws away more green beans than he sells, but the sale price is lucrative enough that it makes it worthwhile. Now, according to OSHA regulations, these green beans have to be off of his property within 24 hours. And so until he met us, every one of these green beans was going to a hole in the ground where they were dumped and buried. When we first heard about what and think about this, he's one of 5 green bean packing houses on the same road doing the same thing every day in this volume. This is not unique. And we work with green bean growers in Georgia and Pennsylvania who do the same thing. So that's a lot of food, perfectly good food, going to waste. And the shame of it is that everybody knows what to do with green beans. There's no mystery to the green beans. They don't require a lot of ingredients to prepare. This is 20,000 pounds of green beans. It was 2 hours of throwaways from the packing house. This is Concord United Methodist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. And their volunteers came and bagged green beans for several hours. And then they started packing around 7 in the morning. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, all of the green beans were gone. They distributed to agencies that were handing them out the same day across 9 counties. And there was only enough waste from the packaging of all of those green beans to fill 1 parking space in the whole parking lot. And those green beans went to feed animals at the zoo. But what we learned through this and some subsequent events is that these green beans, while they feed a lot of hungry people, there are a lot of challenges to working with them because they come with field heat. And so in the heat of the summer, the beans on the inside of the truck, even an open bed truck, they can be roasting at 120 degrees while that truck is traveling. And so while we continue to work with large loads from this grower, we've learned over the years that these have to be the last loads of the day in order to be able to get them, so that they're traveling under cover of darkness to get wherever they're going. And then they have to be dumped out and spread out as soon as they get to the destination spot so that the heat can dissipate overnight. And then they have to be bagged first thing in the morning. And then people need to know that they have to use them the same day that they get them. They either have to be parboiled and frozen, or they need to be cooked the same day. There's just no shelf life on them at all. So we have been working through the years to find more efficient ways to work with this grower. And one of the most exciting things that we've been able to do is that congregations from within sometimes 2 or 3 hours, this is a team from Nashville who went to the packing house to get green beans. They're 2 hours away from Crossville. But they can come and fill up a pickup truck, just an open bed pickup truck with green beans right off of that conveyor. They just drive up under the conveyor and it drops the beans right into the vehicle. It's 5 minutes to fill up a truck that size under the conveyor. So when we do that, those folks can take the truck to their community and distribute right out of the back of the pickup truck. And so we have churches that will have, say, Monday at 2 o'clock, they come and get 3 pickup trucks full of green beans and drive them back to their community and at a set locations. It could be the corner where their church is. It could be at a feeding agency that they work with. And the feeding agencies know that at 5 o'clock on Monday evening, the pickup trucks arrive with green beans. And so over an 18-week period, families in that area can come and get a 10-pound bag of fresh green beans every week. And that's a really effective way to work with those green beans. Even so, it's still just using a minuscule portion of what that grower is throwing away. It's discarding because it doesn't meet a sale contract. And the challenges of the heat and the distance and everything else make it really hard to work with that. And of course, the green beans are grown in rural areas, so we're finding the locations where we can reach safely with green beans to keep them food safe over the period of time. is a challenge, but one that we are excited to work with. But that gives you a little sense maybe of the volume of food waste that we're talking about. It's, the three pears at the back of my refrigerator that went to waste because I forgot they were there are just nothing compared to this level of on-farm food waste. Although the three pears in my refrigerator and your refrigerator and 10,000 other people's refrigerators may begin to compare at some point. So lots of challenges there. And lots of ways that you can help reduce food waste as well.
Lynette, can I jump in for a second? I know
Absolutely.
a couple of folks, you know how it is, lots of other things going on, and a number of folks have to jump off. Can we pause here to let folks ask any questions they might have?
Absolutely. And this is my last slide, I think, other than the how to reach me slide. So yeah, let me stop screen sharing. And I'm glad to answer questions.
My one question you started to answer, right? How can we as individuals and as churches engage? I know, we've had a number of, just a year ago, as a matter of fact, last weekend, we were doing a sweet potato drop, right? And we're bagging that up. How can churches engage with Society of St. Andrews? Are there particular contact people? Do they just go to your staff list? What's the best way for them to interface with y'all?
So lots of different ways. If you want to do it as an individual, the best thing to do is to go to our website and hit our volunteer link. And we've recently changed volunteer programs that we work with. And so currently you'll see the 10 soonest events that are closest to you. So right now there's not a lot growing in Virginia. That's going to change as the season goes on. But so right now you might see events that look pretty far away from you, but as the season gets heated up, you'll see a lot more events coming close to you. So that would be thing one as individuals. As a group, you should probably call our office in Big Island and ask for Ben, and he can help set you up with a group event. And then another thing that you might choose to do within your congregation, we have a program called food waste audits that you could do at a congregational dinner. The idea is that at the first dinner or meal of any sort, you would have people scrape their plates into buckets where you would weigh the amount of food that's left over at the end of the meal, and count the number of people, and then do some measurements that we've got in the program to figure out how much food per person and what the basic cost of that food that's being wasted is. And then over a period of time, you would do some education on reducing food waste with your congregation, and then have a subsequent meal and measure food waste again and see what measures you tried with them were most effective. Is it speaking to a Sunday school class about food waste that's effective, or is it putting signs on the table, the buffet table where the food is, saying only take what you can eat, or is it not using trays, just using smaller plates? Or what are the kinds of things that seem to be most effective interventions at helping people reduce food waste? And then obviously you'd want to try to see what of those things you could carry over into your own home as ways of reducing food waste.
Great, thanks. And the diocese has made contact with Ben was one of the people you connected me with, Lynette, but because it's all geographically located, and our diocese is spread out
right
significantly. So we're already on the radar with those folks to say, hey, when those crops start to come in, we want to be able to help. So,
right.
What other questions do y'all have? I know it's some of you are probably like getting ready to go eat dinner. Some of you might be eating while we're talking. But any last minute questions for Lynette before we let her go have her dinner? It's so, as you were talking, I'm sort of appalled at the number of things I hadn't considered, right? The number of connections and the number of issues that just, I guess, I was pretty naive about. So I appreciate you giving us the deep dive into it to understand it's not as simple as one might think. It's like it's like a giant math problem.
Very much.
Any question? I'm sorry, say again.
Very much that, or jigsaw puzzle, I guess, to put all the pieces together.
Yep. Any last minute questions, friends? Lisa, you have a question.
Yes. Wow, incredible. I'm flabbergasted listening to all of this. But anyway, there's a lot of new programs out there that will deliver you a box with ingredients with just enough for a meal. Hello Fresh, Home Chef. And I tried that for a while because I thought that was a great idea. But then I got really concerned about the packaging of that stuff. There was a lot of packaging. But what do you think about those kind of, there's quite a few of them that are out there. Do they help with food waste?
I don't know that they do. They may encourage people to eat at home instead of eating out. And so there might be less restaurant waste that way. I think ideally what we would want would be what I would call a no regrets solution, where the solution doesn't cause an additional set of problems. And so when we order from the meal kit programs or something like Misfit Markets, while it may help us to eat better at home, and we may feel like we're doing a good thing using food that would otherwise have gone to waste, we're still increasing food miles. So the food from Misfit Markets may be traveling from California to get to your house. Whereas shopping at the farmer's market is going to be food that's traveled, the shortest possible distance to get to your house. So I think there are drawbacks to all of them, and there are good things about them. But we definitely at Society of St. Andrew try to be a no regrets solution. Not that we always are, but we try to be. And I think that's what I would recommend looking for as you're looking to make better food choices.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? I know I used to be guilty of the, twice a month big shopping trips. And my husband's said, why don't you shop like that anymore? I said, because I wasted just too much, right? Awareness is a big thing, so there's things that we do as individuals, there's things our churches can do in our communities. But like everything, right, having conversations about it is important. And so, Lynette, I really appreciate you investing the time to talk with us tonight and have a conversation about this. I'm going to do a plug for your website because great information there, some videos, and just tons of information. It's it's one of my go-to sites. I've worked with folks from your organization for a number of years, and just amazing people, and just appreciate what you do. It's a heavy lift, but I appreciate not only what you do, but your willingness to partner with us.
Well, so grateful for the opportunity to be with you all tonight. And we are at endhunger.org.
Let me copy that for everybody just so they have it. I think I have Virginia on there. That'll still get you to the same place, right? And
endhunger.org is just the national website. And then if you put the /Virginia, that'll get you Virginia things.
Great. All right, y'all. I'm going to let you head off to your respective evenings. Lynette, thanks once again. We appreciate you and all that you do. And for folks who want to watch the webinar again, in short order, we'll get it uploaded to the Creation Care webpage, and it'll be there with the other links if you want to watch again or share the information out with others. Many thanks. Have a blessed evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynette.
Bye-bye.